up everyone? Followed by previous video, we will talk about the PID_T, data type, and fork function in detail in this video. As you can see on the screen, there is a PID_T data type. What is PID_T data type? If you want to find more information about the new reserved words and keywords whenever you watched my video based on my lecture and explanation, you can complement your own flipped learning with Google search based on the previous video, right? So if you try to find the PID_T in Google site, you can find many kinds of the blog or sites, right? So one of them, you can select it and you can read in detail at least 1 or 2 pages, all right? So GNU is very famous for the basic concept of the C programming language, so I clicked the gnu.org. All right, so each process, as I mentioned, is named by a process ID number. So it is the value of type PID_T. Okay, so a process ID is allocated to each process when it's created. Process IDs are reused over time. The lifetime of the process ends when the parent process of the corresponding process waits on the process ID after the process has terminated. So we will learn the process generation and the procedure as well as the completion. So don't worry about it. The parent process can arrange for such waiting to happen implicitly. A process ID uniquely identifies a process only during the lifetime of the process. So it is very important sentence. So please take a picture of this page. Wait. And periodically check your Porter and your written writing, all right? So as a rule of thumb, this means the process must still be running, all right? So we can touch the job control concept using the process IDs and process group as your add sessions in future. On Linux, threads created by threads under the create function. So at that time, we will cover the thread ID also. So the thread ID of the initial thread is same as the process ID of the entire process. So it can be related with the thread ID in future too. So first we should learn about the process ID concept. All right. So as I mentioned, we can create the process ID using PID_T data type. So please write down this sentence in your written notes. The PID data concept is a signed integer type, which is capable of the representing a process ID. All right. In the standard GNU C library, this is on just int. All right. So please open your written note and similar to the previous video, you should write your studying date on top of your last page, and you can write down the today title, so process identification, all right? And please write down English sentences based on your flipped learning. Some students can write down whole English sentence for their future. It is up to you, but the mandatory sentence recorded in your written note, as I mentioned, the process ID uniquely identifies a process only during the lifetime of the process. So this sentence is mandatory for your writing, but other remaining sentences It is up to you, all right? And you go to the proper the location of the data types of the C program language. As I mentioned, you should reserve at least one page per each group of the C programming grammar, right? So first page is for the reserved words. For example, if, else, and for, while, and function. So function types. So one of them is the user defined it function. These are similar concept with the Python and R, right? So we will skip or roughly check the reserved word of the C programming language, and we will compare the reserved word of the C and Python as well as R with the short time, alright? And so you just check the framework of the reserved word of the C programming language, alright? User defined function and standard function and so on, alright? And if we consider the functions in C programming language only, printf, fork, main, as we will add whenever we meet new functions in C programming languages. So in the second page, you should allocate for the functions writing, all right? And in the third page, you go to the data type of the C programming language. And in a previous video, we summarized the general, the basic, the data types of the C programming language, and we focused on the struct. It is a new concept of the C programming language, right? So you should write down the struct, the definitions, as well as the grammar in your notes. At the end of the struct, you should add the PID underbar T. It is not a general the C programming the data type, but it can be representative for type of. So we will touch it together. So anyway, for the first time, for a beginner, you should put the PID underbar T. So it is alright, so you should write down with my video right now. So the PID underbar T data type is a signed integer. What is a signed? Signed means the positive values only, right? So naturally we can imagine unsigned integer means the negative integer values, right? So PID underbar T data type is a signed integer integer type which is capable of representing a process ID. So similar to this concept, in future, if you want to make your own C programming code with another aspect or problem, you can also make your own data type with a signed integer type, all right, for expressing something, all right? So it is just int value in the standard GNU C library, all right? Library. This is just an int, all right? Okay. So what is GNU? You can think GNU just the standard group or the institute for the C programming language, all right? So whenever you or someone makes some new functions or data type or concept for the C programming language, finally the GNU should allow them as a standard or general concept for the all over the world researchers. All right. Okay. So PID data type is just integer. You should memorize it. All right. So we can't use the get PID or fork function for usage PID underbar T data type. All right. So we will touch the get PID function for returning the process ID of the current process, and we can also use the get PPID for returning the process ID of the parent of the current process, and we can also use the get TID for returning the thread ID of the current thread. All right. So these functions can be specific to Linux. So you just refer the PID underbar T data type with 3 related functions in this time, at this time only. All right. And we will go to the types underbar H header file. In the last video of the last week, I request please type this code in your Linux with your ID connection for preview, right? So as you can see on the screen, there are 4 header files on top of this code, right? So error related header file and types that header file, unit standard header file, stdio that header file. You are familiar with the stdio header file because standard input and output header file. So for usage of the printf function, as I mentioned in a second week video, we should include stdio.header file for usage of the printf function, right? Similar to the PID underbar 2 data type, we should include types.h as well as unistandard.h header files, because PID underbar T data type was defined in these header files. So without these header file, we cannot execute this file successfully. So intentionally, please omit one of the header files in this code, and you can try execute this code for checking the intended error, right? So you can make your own errors as much as possible for a beginner, because whenever you met some errors, you should recognize and try to understand the error meaning, and you can think all by yourself, oh, I had a mistake of the alphabet typing, or I missed the including of specific header file, or I did not follow the basic C programming grammar, such as reserved words or omitting some closing brace and so on, right? So I recommend many errors can grown up you about C program language too, all right? So limited of the lecture time, I cannot touch the all cases about errors of the C program language on top of Linux, all right? So it is up to you. So even though my video only 25 or only within the 75 minutes per week, but as we can see many cases with my video, you should test or exercise all possible cases of C programming all by yourself on top of Linux. So you should spend your own time about the 2 times of the 75 minutes, so around 3 hours per week. So you should complement all by yourself, every concept all by yourself, all right? Okay, so We focused on PID underbar T at this time, right? So as I mentioned, PID underbar T was defined these header files. So after checking PID underbar T in Google, we can also should try to find the types.h in Google, right? So you can find types.h file. It was programmed by the previous famous C programmers, right? So we don't need to touch them. You just include types.header file on top of your own C code and then use it, all right? And you can find the PID with the Control F. So you can put the PID here. So we can find the PID types of process identification, right? So before checking underbar PID underbar T data type in the Google site, first you should try to the types.h file first, all right? And then you can go to the first or second link, and then with the Control F, we can type PID, and we can find PID underbar T was defined for the underbar P underbar PID underbar T, right? So as you can see on the screen, if you want to use the PID underbar T in your source code, we should include types.h as I mentioned. So we try to find types.h in Google sites, and then we checked many kinds of data types, right? But our focus is just the PID underbar T data type, right? So PID underbar T was defined for underbar PID underbar T, right? So naturally, intrinsically, underbar means the hidden variable, all right? So we don't need to check the all hidden variable in C and Linux, but we can imagine PID underbar T is assigned the integer value for identifying process ID, such as 0 or 101 or 5071 and so on, right? So for expressing the signed integer value, C programmers defined PID underbar T with the Typedef reserved word. So what is the Typedef? You are not familiar with the Typedef because it is not existed in interpreting languages such as Python or R. So we can first try find the Typedef in C programming in Google site together, all right? So Typedef is a keyword used in C programming language to assign alternative name. What is alternative name? Your second name, alias, your nickname to existing data types. It's mostly used with user-defined data types when names of the data types become slightly complicated to use in program. So you should click images as I mentioned in a previous video, and you can check one of the familiar or proper figures based on your selection. So in case of me, I just click the second figure for understanding, and I can help you about the Typedef in C programming language for the basic grammar. So as you can see on the screen, Typedef int hot, Typedef float cold. You are familiar with int and float because they are basic data type is C programming language, as you can them on your keyboard, right? But instead of int and float, we want to use hot or cold for expressing each basic data type. For example, inside of the main function, hot x means we want to make our own memory space with the name x, but the real value of the x variable is int with 15, right? So you can type hot instead of int because we want to express the integer value for the temperature of the hot. How about cold y? So we want to express the physical meaning of the variable y for coordinates, right? So instead of a float, we can express cold, right? So after 2 lines, we can print out each meaning with 2 printf functions. Hot variable is 15. Cold variable is 20.5, right? So you are good at English, right? So similar to the interpreting languages such as Python or R, we can type our intention and thought with English sentences based on C programming basic grammar, right? So we can imagine, through this figure and source codes, programmers wanted to express the hot and cold temperatures to their customers or users, right? So to express more imaginary meaning, we can use the Typedef reserved word instead of the basic type data types, right? So using this example, we can imagine Typedef of meaning, right? So please take photo of this picture and periodically check of the grammar of the Typedef in C programming. Typedef is very familiar and common in C programming language, so I recommend you use and refer Typedef as much as possible. All right. So we go to the original the part of our computer structure and system lecture. So as you can see on the screen, Typedef is used for the _ PID _ T instead of PID _ T, right? So please compare the location, the basic data types, and new words, right? So these are basic type and that is new word. So we can only use the PID _ T in your source code instead of _ PID _ T, right? So can you understand the meaning of the PID _ T? Yeah, if you are that, you are successful for understanding Typedef as well as PID _ T meaning. Okay, so please write down the exact definition of the Typedef in your written note. So on top of PID _ T, you should put Typedef. Okay, Typedef. Typedef, it is a keyword used in C language to assign alternative, another second names, right? Names to existing data types, right? It's mostly used with user-defined defined data types. When names of the data types become slightly complicated to use in programs. Alright? So, in this video, we just check the Typedef grammar in C program language with PID_T concept in computer structure and system. In the next video, we will cover the computer structure and system concept for process with the fork, two functions. First function is the lowercase f for original function, and another second function is the capital F for function. It is the user-defined left function, so we will compare two fork functions with our own source code together, as well as the PID_T data type. Alright, so please repeat my video based on your understanding and capability, and please prepare for your own midterm test. We will have our midterm tests in the second week of the 성균관 University, right? So please check the information of the midterm test in iCampus 2, and please prepare for your midterm test for covering theory concept as well as the C programming exercise. I will think the representative and the examples of the theory parts of the our lecture. For example, data type can existed only basic in C program language. This sentence is not correct because we can consider the user newly defined data type such as the typedef, struct, and so on, right? And how about PID_T theory examples? PID_T is a basic data type. Is it correct? No, it is not correct because PID_T is a user-defined the data type with the typedef, right? So PID_T is a signed integer data type. So PID_T is new data type with the typedef, right? How about exercise parts? You can think about the hello.c and this source code. The file name is fork_ex, or it is up to you, fork_ex2.c. Anyway, the second, our representative C code with PID_T as well as fork functions. I can modify the number of the fork functions calling, and then we can add another printf function with the PID_T data type and so on. So please review our videos and lecture notes, and please check your written notes and portfolio word file for checking the every steps of the computer structure and systems. All right. Okay. Thank you for listening. See you next video. Bye bye.